right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Matt Menashes, the NGS Executive Director, and I am so thrilled tonight to be with all of you for tonight's encore presentation of Revealing Our Full American Mosaic with Andre Kearns. I think many of you know that Andre gave the banquet speech at the NGS conference in Sacramento last month, and it was so enjoyable, and we all learned so much from the presentation that we thought we'd bring it back for those of you who missed it in Sacramento. And Andre and his wife Nadine are on tonight to give an encore performance of Revealing Our Full American Mosaic. By way of introduction, Andre Kearns is a genealogist, a speaker and writer who serves on the NGS board and chairs the NGS Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Andre holds a BA in Business Administration from Morehouse College and an MBA from Harvard Business School. He lives in Washington, D.C., not too far from me in Silver Spring, Maryland, with his wife and 2 sons. So with that, let me introduce our tonight's speaker, Andre Kearns. Thank you, Andre.
Thanks, Matt, and good evening to everyone. Let me start by saying we had an amazing conference last month in Sacramento. And just for me, it just felt so good to be back in person, learning, sharing, and exploring our family history together. And what I'll also say is that NGS recognizes that the pandemic that we've all gone through has changed our world and now how we live our lives. So as an organization, we're rapidly adapting and embracing new hybrid models to accommodate our members both in person and virtually. And so I hope that you see tonight's Member Connects event as an example of NGS and our commitment to adaptation in order to better serve you as members of this amazing organization. So thank you so much for this opportunity to deliver this encore presentation of my conference keynote, Revealing Our Full American Mosaic, here on Zoom. So let's get started. It was 2019, and I was touring for the first time Mount Vernon, the 8,000-acre plantation of George Washington, our nation's first president, and his wife, Martha Washington. I work for Amazon, and I was there with other company leaders for an all-day planning offsite. We participated in meetings mixed with tours and activities on the property, really designed to provide us insight into Washington and his approach to leadership. That morning, guides led us on a tour of the plantation. And as we strolled, our tour guide shared stories of everything that Washington had achieved as a leader of the Revolution, as our nation's first president, and as the owner of this vast Mount Vernon plantation that we were touring. At one point, a colleague whom I was walking with turned to me and said in utter amazement, how in the world was Washington able to accomplish so much here at Mount Vernon while also leading our nation? I knew the answer to my colleague's question, but I left it unspoken in the moment. George Washington was a man of many gifts. He was a revered military leader, and he was the father of our country who led a remarkably productive life. He was also an enslaver who, over the course of his lifetime, controlled over 577 enslaved persons. It was with this labor that is what made Mount Vernon a thriving plantation and freed Washington to dedicate his time and energy to the political and civil concerns that made him America's most revered president. Washington's life is well documented. The same, unfortunately, cannot be said about the lives of the hundreds of African families he enslaved at Mount Vernon. Due to the disinterest in documenting the lives of enslaved persons beyond their monetary value to the enslaver or to their enslaver's estate, historians have had to work harder to really uncover their lives. But their lives are there to be uncovered. Their names, their families, their skills, their milestones, their accomplishments, their legacies. The reality is, to tell a more whole and accurate history of Washington, we need to be committed to do the work to uncover the stories of those he enslaved over his lifetime. Integrate their stories into the narrative shared at places like Mount Vernon, and recognize their contributions to building Mount Vernon and to building this country. And just as we honor Washington for his accomplishments achieved on behalf of America, we need to honor them for theirs. I've noticed a movement happening across many of our country's leading institutions to uncover, come to terms with, and atone for the history of slavery in our country. And this movement is also equipping these institutions to represent a more inclusive and holistic version of American history. And I'm here for that. And so here are a few examples. Georgetown University, located in the city I call home, in 2015, shared a history it uncovered of 272 enslaved people who were sold by the school to Louisiana in order to fund the school's future. In response to this history that they uncovered, Georgetown convened a working group on slavery, memory, and reconciliation that's now driving the work to research, digitize, and share the history it's uncovered for those that it enslaved. And the university also issued an apology. They've renamed 2 buildings in honor of the people that they enslaved. And the university's established the Georgetown University 272 Project to connect with descendants of those enslaved by the university. Harvard University, where I attended business school, recently shared a report revealing that it had enslaved at least 70 people in its history, and announced that it was creating a $100 million fund to allow students and faculty to research, preserve, and share the school's history of slavery, and share the lives of those that it enslaved. The University of Virginia in Charlottesville, where my son just completed his first year of college, recently unveiled the Memorial to Enslaved Laborers, designed as concentric granite rings in tribute to the over 4,000 enslaved persons who worked the university grounds over its history. I first saw the memorial with my family on a campus visit when my son was a high school senior. Now, one of the things that struck me was that the memorial features the engraved names of 578 enslaved people and their contributions, their specific individual contributions to the university. And they're engraved on these granite rings. And so I say all that to say that it's important that we speak the names, that we write the names of marginalized people who have been rendered invisible in traditional historical narratives. On that same day in Charlottesville, my family and I visited Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's plantation, for the first time. And you can see in the photo, I'm sporting my COVID-19 beard. I've cleaned up a little bit better since then. But the Thomas Jefferson Foundation, which runs Monticello, in my mind, raises the bar for how historical sites can and should incorporate the institution of slavery into how it tells a more whole and accurate American history. Tightly integrated into its showcase of Jefferson is a history of the more than 600 people he enslaved over his lifetime. Their stories are told and memorialized through preserved structures built to house enslaved families, exhibit labels integrated throughout the plantation, and through a Slavery at Monticello lecture, which begins with a description of the life of a man named Jupiter Evans, whose own life mirrored Jefferson's in many, many aspects, except that he lived his life enslaved to Jefferson. The depth of Jefferson's connection to slavery is most powerfully revealed through Monticello's telling of the life of Sally Hemings, who was born enslaved in 1773, the half-sister of Jefferson's wife, Martha. She was brought to Monticello as a baby with her mother and siblings around 1774. And based on oral history, extensive published histories, in-depth genealogical research, and extensive DNA studies, historians have concluded that Jefferson is the biological father of Sally Hemings' 6 children. Uncovering the story of Hemings is particularly instructive for us in understanding the role that in-depth genealogical research can play in revealing our whole and accurate history as a country. Genealogy offers us a powerful opportunity to uncover and share the stories of people traditionally excluded from historical narratives so that the full mosaic of our American history is revealed. And I learned this through my own personal genealogical journey. My parents both grew up Black in the segregated South during the Civil Rights era. My dad's family is from Charlotte, North Carolina, and my mom's family is from Suffolk, Virginia. They met, they married, and they settled in Washington, D.C. in the final years of the Great African-American Migration, which is where I was born and raised. Growing up, I remember watching the original airing of Alex Haley's Roots miniseries as a young child and really being fascinated by it. And I didn't realize it back then, but it planted a seed in me, which has now blossomed into a passion to trace my own family roots. And I'll also note that what I call a passion, my wife might call an obsession. So I've been a genealogist now for about 16 years. I've extensively researched my family tree, tracing back to 1619 and the first Africans to arrive in Virginia. I've uncovered ancestors with deep roots in the American South who were enslaved persons, enslavers, and free people of color. And my DNA results reveal that I descend from African, indigenous, and European ancestors. Discovering this ancestry has revealed the full American mosaic within my own family, within my own blood, within my own DNA. I've uncovered many powerful stories over the course of my genealogy journey. Tonight, I want to share 3 with you. And so for each of these stories, I want to share 3 things. Number 1, what I discovered about my ancestor. Number 2, why I'm inspired by my ancestor's story. And number 3, how current historians can use similar stories to tell a more whole history of our American mosaic. Story number 1. Sarah Ann Biggs, my mother's great-great-grandmother, was born enslaved around 1848 in Bertie County, North Carolina. Now, I discovered through an 1844 probate record for an enslaver named Godwin Cotton that Sarah Ann Biggs' own mother, Clara, had been bought by the enslaver Cater Biggs for the grand total of $1, likely as a favor to his wife Jane, whom Clara had served as a childhood playmate. And so on this slide, I've highlighted the $1 transaction with a red box. Post-emancipation, Sarah Ann Biggs became a teacher in North Carolina freedmen schools between 1865 and 1870. And she was likely able to pursue teaching post-emancipation because, as an enslaved house servant, she'd learned how to read and write from her enslavers. By 1880, she'd moved 60 miles north with 3 young children to Suffolk, Virginia, to pursue a career as a teacher. And so it's inspiring for me to know that she dedicated her life to teaching fellow formerly enslaved people to read and to write, and really to help them transform their lives through education. And this value in education, which she seeded in our family, led many, many years later for my own mother to choose teaching as a profession. So, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, no relation by the way, when you write your next history book, be sure to tell the story of the role Black women played in education during Reconstruction. Story number 2. Now, I mentioned earlier that my son just completed his first year of college at the University of Virginia. And so before we drove him to school, my wife and I sat down to let him know that he is a true son of Virginia. You see, I've traced his ancestry back to his 11th great-grandfather, Emmanuel Cumbo, born to Africans named Emmanuel and Joan, who arrived as captives from the kingdom of Ndongo, which is in modern-day Angola, to Virginia as early as 1619. Don't know the exact date, but could be as early as 1619. And then what I do know is that in September 1644, the Virginia House of Burgess ruled Emmanuel Cumbo to be an indentured servant with a 21-year service term, and ruled him not to be a slave for life. Then in 1665, after 21 years, he was freed from indentured service. And so from that point on, Cumbo descendants lived as free citizens in America. On April 18, 1667, Cumbo was granted by William Berkeley, governor of the colony of Virginia, 50 acres in James City County, making him one of the few African-American landowners in 17th century Virginia. Our son literally descends from a Black cavalier. Over successive generations, many Cumbo family branches either maintained Black identities or passed into white communities or fully embraced Native American identities. And so Cumbo descendants today self-identify across all of these racial groups. And the Cumbo family really represents a powerful ancestral story that all Americans should know. It's the story of an African man and woman's resilience and agency over bondage, and determination to build a free life for their son and for future generations. So, historian Skip Gates, when you produce your next PBS documentary, be sure to highlight the role Africans, such as the Cumbos, played in creating a thriving Virginia colonial society, and how their contributions and that of their descendants have helped and continue to help shape American democracy toward a more perfect union. Story number 3. So 2 months ago, I was inducted into the District of Columbia Society of the Sons of the American Revolution. My 5th great-grandfather Johannes Schmeyer, anglicized as John Smyer, rendered material aid to the Revolutionary Army. He was a German who immigrated aboard the ship Neptune to Pennsylvania in 1775, and then from Pennsylvania, he migrated to Lincoln County, North Carolina by 1771 in search of land. Now, German immigrants participated on both sides of the Revolutionary War, but my ancestor John was a patriot. He was a landowner, he was a farmer, he was a mill operator, he was a logger, he was a woodworker, he was a merchant, among many things. And he lived his life to the ripe old age of 106. John was also a slave owner. I am a Black man admitted into SAR under a German immigrant patriot ancestor. John Smyer Sr. was the grandfather of my third great-grandfather, Henry Johnston. And Henry was born enslaved in 1848 in Catawba County, North Carolina, which is formerly Lincoln County, North Carolina. And so Kern's family oral history identified his father only as Master Smyer. So through years of research, I confirmed that Henry was born to my fourth great-grandmother, Millie, an enslaved woman whose story I'm still working to uncover. And when I do, I'm going to publish it to the Q. And John Smyer Jr., the son of John Smyer Sr., the patriot. Henry was not formally acknowledged by the Smyers because they owned him. They never freed him, nor his mother, Millie. Henry was ultimately emancipated post-Civil War. And according to family oral history, he left the Smyer plantation after the war ended over a family inheritance dispute. He moved one county over into Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, to a place called Long Creek Township, which is a rural suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina, where he started a new life for himself and his family as a freedman. By seeking admission into SAR, I chose to make a public acknowledgement of Henry's lineage, an acknowledgement he never received from his father or the Smyer family in his entire lifetime. I'm also doing my part to expand the publicly shared Smyer family history to this more whole history of the family. So now Henry and his Black descendants will be John's only recorded family in SAR. Psalm chapter 118, verses 22 reads, "The stone that the builder rejected has become the cornerstone." This verse reflects well what my SAR membership now realizes. I'm inspired by my ancestors Henry's agency to move to a new place post-emancipation and build a brand new life for himself and for his family as free people, to contribute to American history and advance freedom in this country. And so to all chapters of the Sons of the American Revolution nationwide, know that patriots and their descendants come in all colors. Let's all align to a vision to make the SAR community more inclusive and diverse, and in doing so, capture the whole truth of our American history. Our family stories are American history. We all face unique challenges uncovering them. My ancestors call me to uncover their stories of how they built this country, and they call me to share those stories forward. This is what drives my commitment to make the genealogy community more inclusive of diverse voices and stories from our full American mosaic. NGS is committed to creating an organization that is welcoming to all people. Unfortunately, we recognize that the society was not fully welcoming throughout its entire history. And so we believe it's important that our society understands its history, works to create a positive and inclusive culture throughout our organization, and that we seek to expand access to education, research, and records for the diverse needs of the entire genealogical community. I joined the NGS board in 2020, and in 2021, we launched an NGS Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative, for which I proudly serve as chair. And we've established an amazing steering committee to help NGS realize its vision to be a society open to all people, seeking to discover their family stories, be inspired by them, and to give voices to their ancestors. Our goals are to, number one, introduce our DEI strategy to our society. Number two, collect better member data to access diversity across our society. Three, update organizational, editorial, and marketing policies for inclusion. And four, drive DEI strategic partnerships and in member engagement initiatives. So here's my call to action to you as members. Engage and inspire our society by sharing your family stories and your knowledge. And so here are three specific things that you can do for us. Number one, focus on uncovering family stories of your ancestors, and particularly ancestors traditionally marginalized by our history: the enslaved, people of color, women, immigrants, LGBTQ+, the poor. Learn your ancestors' names and uncover their stories. Number two, uncovering the stories of historically marginalized people is often more difficult due to a lack of documentation. But dig deep, be persistent, be creative, uncover those stories, and then share with all of us exactly how you did it, and empower other people to do the same. Three, share the stories you uncover with us through our publications and through our conferences, so we all can be inspired by them, and so that we can gain a greater understanding of our whole history as a country. The Sankofa bird appears frequently in traditional Ghanaian art and has also been adopted as an important symbol to African Americans, representing the need to reflect on the past to build a successful future. Like the Sankofa bird, NGS is looking back, learning, and working to build an inclusive future where everyone feels and knows that they belong. Reflection has allowed NGS to become more fully aware of the massive and important responsibility it has to be a vessel for the voices of all Americans, voices from the past, voices from the present, and the future. So please join us as we move forward to uncover the full mosaic of our American history. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. For those of you who are on camera, I'm sure Andre would appreciate physical claps or virtual claps, which you can do from the reactions button on your Zoom screen. Andre, that was fantastic. Seeing it in person and seeing it in Zoom was the same experience. Such great stories of your family, such great information that we can all learn from about the way you went about searching for your ancestors and connecting their stories to the future of NGS and to lessons that all of us can learn, told through your thoughts to Doris Kearns Goodwin, to Skip Gates, and to the Sons of American Revolution. So thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation. We're so glad you were here to present it again for NGS members.
Thanks for the opportunity.
You're quite welcome. Now's the time of the evening where we can do a little bit of a meet and greet with Andre. This is an NGS Member Connects event. It's a chance for our members to talk, to meet, to ask questions, to spend time with each other. And so we're going to ask those of you who would like to share your thoughts or to introduce yourselves to the group, to Andre, to Nadine, Andre's wife, who has been running the PowerPoint behind the scenes here, to either raise your hand if you're on camera, or again, with the reaction button, click the raise the hand icon, and that will bring you to the front of the queue, so that we can call upon you, ask you to unmute and say a few words. So
I also just like to point out, I talked about my son in the talk, and he's my oldest son, but I have two sons. And so my youngest son actually was on the Zoom as well, listening.
Well, welcome to him. Thank you for having the family here. So I am going to lower my hand and see who else has their hand up. Again, if you're on camera, feel free to just raise your hand like this and I'll call on you and ask you to unmute. If you're off camera and want to use the reaction button to virtually raise your hand, please do that. We'll start with Emily Gansel. We'll ask her to unmute.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm not sure how well you can hear me.
We can hear you fine, thanks.
But thank you for a very good presentation. That was very interesting. I'm wondering about the availability of a lot of the documentation. As you said, there's not a whole lot for African American history or so forth. I know that Ancestry has done a bit with the Freedmen's Bureau. And I'm just wondering if you have ideas for other sources to look at. I've done an awful lot in looking at trying to look at probate records and trying to look at wills and so forth. But I'm wondering if you have any ideas of other places to dig.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. I would say first one I want to point out is I think oral family history is important, right? A lot of times oral family history is going to provide you the clues that you need to really guide your research in a very focused way. And so what I advise people is that there are 4 steps to research. One is, record your family tree, document your family tree. Step 1. Step 2 is to gather that oral family history, talk to your family elders, gather as much as you can. Step 3 is traditional records research. And then step 4 is DNA testing, if you're so inclined. But in terms of the documentation and researching that's available for enslaved persons, I agree with you. Probate records, wills, deeds of enslavers. And so again, that's why the clues around family oral history are important. My family had passed down the clue that my 3rd great grandfather, Henry Johnston, was owned by and the son of Master Smyer. And so that was enough of a clue to guide my research to uncover exactly who he was talking about. But there are records available of enslavers, and as they're documenting those that they enslaved. And so it's really an interesting dynamic for me, because I feel like I have to research in one mode and then storytell in a different mode. So when I'm researching, when I'm researching my enslaved ancestors, I really do have to research the families that enslaved them just as deeply as I'm researching my enslaved family. You can't separate them because, in fact, enslaver research will lead you to your enslaved ancestors. And so I really have to research deeply those families who enslaved my ancestors to then identify my enslaved ancestors. But then once I've gotten out of that research mode and that mindset, then I need to flip my mindset in terms of storytelling. And I want to be anchoring my stories in the lives and the stories of my enslaved ancestors. So I'm not going to be telling my stories or sharing my stories from the perspective of the enslaver. I'm going to really work to flip it and tell the story from the perspective of my enslaved ancestor. So in addition to those wills, probates, deed records that I referenced, 1870 census is a really valuable a document I found researching enslaved ancestors, because that's the first census, obviously, where formerly enslaved people appear by name. Previously, they just appeared as check marks, and then ages and whether they were male or female. So that's valuable. Marriage records I found valuable because they could often list the name of someone who was born enslaved, their mother and father. Same with death records. So I think those are, examples of records that I found valuable to advance my research, particularly around my enslaved ancestors.
Fantastic. We've got a couple of additional hands. We're going to start with Sharon Garner and then Judith Hughes, and then I see Anise Ashton third. We'll start with those three. Sharon?
We've been Fred and I have been looking into the history of my own enslaved ancestors. And we discovered, to our surprise, in South Carolina, when we went to the courthouse, that we thought all the courthouse records had been indexed, but it turned out they'd only indexed the white trials. The slaves and free persons of color were all in a separate jury system, separate trial system, and those had never been done. So going through those records was just absolutely amazing, but we would have never known they existed without going to the courthouse and going through every box.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's an amazing number of documents that have been digitized and are available. A good portion of, thanks to organizations such as that NGS supports, organizations like Ancestry and Family Search, etc. A lot of those digitized records are also indexed, so it makes it easier to search them, but it's limited in indexing. And so I was excited to see, for example, Family Search and Ancestry announced, I think it was in February, the expansion of their indexing efforts, particularly around deeds and probate records and things, to index all the names in those documents, not just the name of the owner of the estate, yeah. Right? And so that's going to help tremendously to make a lot of the names of, for example, people enslaved to those families more discoverable to researchers.
Yeah, these particular documents have not been filmed either. They're just, they're there if you go to the courthouse, but that's the only place they exist.
That is part of the mission of NGS as well, is to what can we do to preserve and help organizations to digitize and make available records like that. Again, so any document is really is helpful in helping us to uncover these stories that we want to uncover.
Thanks, Sharon. Go to Judith, and then we'll after Judith, we'll go to Anise, and then up to Jill, and then Claire.
Hello, Andre. A couple of questions. Have you used the different university libraries as a resource? And have you used the fan research of your enslaver families to help with your research?
Fan research, you mean friends, associates, neighbors?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So in terms of universities, yes, I have benefited from university research. And by the way, Judith, it's great to see you. Judith is my Mecklenburg County cousin and research partner in all things Mecklenburg County. So we got a nice group here where we work together to help each other uncover our family histories. But yeah, I would say, for example, as I've researched my Kearns family history, I've traced my Kearns ancestry back to a woman named Charlotte Kearns, who was actually enslaved on Cedar Grove Plantation in Hopewell Township in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. And a few weeks ago, actually, I had the amazing experience to go and visit the Cedar Grove Plantation for the very first time on Juneteenth weekend and present my family history there and how I traced my family history back to the plantation. But I share all that to say that one major collection that I utilized was the papers of the Torrance family who owned the Cedar Grove Plantation. And those papers have been archived and digitized by the University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And so they were exceptionally helpful in my research of my family. And then, yeah, I mean, fan research is really important in uncovering our family history. So just generally, yes, not only I guess I was saying before, to uncover my enslaved ancestors, I have to deeply research the families who enslaved them. And it also helps to research the friends, associates, and neighbors of enslavers to really uncover the full picture of family history. So absolutely.
Thanks, Judith. Anise.
Yes, one of the stumbling blocks that I have found is when your European ancestor was not a property owner. They were usually overseers. Through Y-DNA, we matched a European family closely, second, third cousins. But the paternal line were not property owners. And in South Carolina, they do not have marriage records. They weren't required until 1910, about 1910. So when you have a European 100% match for DAR membership, but the person was not a property owner, so you won't find that they own the female ancestor.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do the Y and find out that their name probably was changed or modified,
Mm-hmm.
with Scott Irish,
Mm-hmm.
how do you overcome that stumbling block, especially when 1830 census and 1840 census, they thought it was a good idea to alphabetize the records. It was nice if you could see the individual in 1830 with their neighbors versus in alphabetical order on a lot of the census records for 1830, 1840 in South Carolina counties.
Mm-hmm.
How do you overcome those two crucial stumbling blocks to get past that, to get past to where they actually were?
I would say a couple things. One, I don't think it's stumbling block doesn't come to mind. It sounds like you've uncovered a pretty incredible story through DNA. And
yes,
really,
I have the story plus the genealogy. I can put the family there, but I don't know where the maternal line was, because the person was an overseer or just lived in the neighborhood, never owned any property either.
I got you. Yeah, I got you. So I would just, without going into the deep details, what I would say is I'd highlight from your story that, to me, your story highlights the power of DNA, etched in our history, to be able to uncover stories that were previously we were not able to uncover. I think that it humbles me often to think that because I have access to things like DNA technology and these digitized records, that I know so much more about the ancestry of my enslaved ancestors than they did in their entire lives. It's really humbling. So, I mean, DNA has that amazing power. And to your point, I think you referenced DAR. I think DAR is modeling this for SAR a little bit, but part of my involvement in SAR is going to be really encouraging SAR to enable incorporation of DNA into proofs, into preponderance of evidence cases that you make for admission into these lineage societies. Because as you say, often the documentation is not there, but there is documentation etched in our DNA, and that as support, as part of a broader preponderance of evidence or proof argument. I think that organizations like SAR need to grow the capabilities of their genealogists to be able to evaluate cases like that, because that's going to make those organizations more inclusive. Because again, we come in all shapes and colors, and there are a lot of ways to reveal our ancestry.
Great. Thanks, Anise. Thanks, Andre, for that answer. Jill, I think you were next.
Okay, this is a little slightly different than what other people have been bringing up. Have you, in your research, did you run across any slave passes for travel, or a enslaved person being punished because they left without a pass?
Huh. I have not, but
Okay.
but I will say this: my third great grandfather, Axum White, was a free man of color in Virginia, and basically every few years in Virginia, you had to register with the county as
Yeah.
free, so they could keep track of you, and also keep a copy of your registration papers with you at all
Right.
times.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And so I do have a copy of his free Negro registration records, which, predates photography. So it just has like a description of him. So
Mhm.
that, I guess.
Do you remember
once-
what year that was?
I think it was like for 1859.
Okay, the reason I'm asking, I had a great grand uncle or something, and he was hung for forging passes.
Oh my goodness.
And he was brought from Lawrence County to Greenville County in South Carolina. And I'm just trying to find more information about the slave passes and how they worked and all that. It's just, there's very little out there. I just was kind of hoping maybe you'd run across one or two.
If anyone
Well,
else, I'll let
yeah.
Andre answer, but if anyone else has resources and can drop that in the chat, that would be appreciated.
Thank
And then
you, Matt.
Jill, I look forward to your article in the queue.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Go figure it out and tell us.
Yeah, I will. Thank you so much.
If we're doing anything tonight, Andre, we're pushing authors into the queue. That's absolutely fantastic.
Queue up
Claire.
the queue.
Claire, go ahead.
Thank you,
There you
Andre,
go.
for a very, very interesting presentation. And thank you for putting it on again, Matt. This is, again, something a little bit different from the comments of the others have been made, but you made a suggestion, Andre, that people come forward and share these kinds of stories that you unveil, particularly about marginalized peoples. And I think that's a fabulous idea. One idea, obviously, is publishing your story in the queue. Got it? Perfect, wonderful. But not everybody is going to do that. And I wonder if NGS is not in a great position to facilitate that kind of sharing on the new, and Matt, you have to help me here. What's the name of the new forum that you've introduced last year? What is it called again?
Forum.
Forum, okay,
Yep.
on the forum. I think that this is, again, I keep pushing this idea. I think it's a great opportunity for people to share things, but it's hard. One thing I would like to see happen is there could be a specific place on the forum set aside for this kind of thing. Share your story about your marginalized ancestors. I had put, if everything just goes under the heading of discussion, you don't find things that, there are tons and hundreds of discussion threads, and you don't find a particular place to go and look for this particular thing. I think there should be a separate place, for example, for brick walls. I think there should be a separate place for, here are the surnames I'm searching. And your idea of sharing your stories about your marginalized ancestors could be a place. I don't know how to set that up, but I have to believe that somebody at NGS could set something up like that, and it would be a wonderful additional resource of the forum. I just think, I hope that people will continue to use the discussion threads, but this would be a perfect example for how you can encourage the whole theme of marginalized people's stories. That was my point. Thank you.
Really appreciate those words. Appreciate you plugging Forum. Hopefully everyone has tried it. Appreciate the feedback you provide on how to make Forum, you've just provided on how to make Forum better. We'll make a note of that for sure. And we welcome everyone to try it and to be very candid in your feedback to us and how we can make it better, how we can improve the experience, how we can better facilitate the dialogue, because that's what it's all about. And then also the spirit of what you're sharing is we also hear that, right? Like, I think that I would love for everyone on this call to be inspired to submit an article in the Q or in the magazine or to give a talk at a conference. But the reality is also that some people feel very intimidated by, writing a 2,000 word article. And it shouldn't have to take that to share your family story. So I do think Forum is a way to get started there. And then I'll just promise you that we're having these discussions. We're trying to think creatively about what are other ways that we can empower our members to share stories with one another that perhaps don't have that same bar as publishing it to the magazine. So we're open to suggestions on that above and beyond the Forum, which is a vehicle that's been highlighted here. And, we love to hear thoughts, ideas, suggestions on how we can do that. And we're all about moving forward on those.
One last point. I think a lot of people don't realize that you can subscribe to Forum in the digest form and get one email every single day, which is a huge advantage. So if somehow you can get that word out more, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank
Claire,
you.
fantastic. And
we need Claire as an administrator of Forum.
Well, we actually have Kate Smith, our organizations and communities manager, on with us tonight. So I'm sure she's furiously taking notes about that. And Claire and Kate, I know you've spoken in the past, so we'll do some follow up on that as well.
Thank you.
Sometime in mid-July when Kate's back to work. Today is the last day she's on duty as she heads on vacation tomorrow. So thank you, Claire. Your check is in the mail for plugging Forum. We'll make sure you get that. Hi, Tina, you're up next.
Hi. So I just wanted to make a comment about two comments. One about the DNA. I had, in my search, found that my Swedish great-grandmother was illegitimate. And I didn't find out until I got back to Sweden. And then there's this little notation. Every document with her name has a notation that she's illegitimate. So I can understand why she'd want to get out of Sweden and drop that. But what's interesting about DNA was I actually found her father. And when I got to go to Sweden, got to meet her family, that part of the family. They knew nothing about her, but they were gracious and they accepted us. And they said, August didn't have 6 children. He had 7. So that was really, really cool. But then on a personal note, I just wanted to find out from Andre what his family thought about the photo discovery that we made in Sacramento.
Oh, they were so excited to see that the mystery had been solved. So Tina and I met at she was an exhibitor at our conference in Sacramento, and she's got a great new company called
Related Faces. I wasn't meaning to be a plug. I just wanted to know from you. What
Related Faces.
Like it was a great debate between the family members, whether it was him, whether I just wanted to know what they thought.
So no, they were excited. So basically, the Related Faces technology allows you to take photos and then compare them, and it'll give you a probability around what's the likelihood that you're looking at the same people.
Right.
And so what I shared with Tina was that there is one photo I've had passed down to the family that's always resembled my great grandfather, but no one was ever quite sure if it was him because it was such a young man. It's such an old photo. And so we were able to upload the photos of the younger person plus known photos of my great grandfather. And sure enough, Related Faces was able to say with 99.9% probability that it was the same person. So that was an amazing discovery. And my family was just wowed by the power of modern technology to solve family mysteries.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dina. Are there any other hands up? I see Louise and Frankie. We'll go Louise first and then Frankie. Hi, Louise.
Hi, I'm researching. I'm an author and have been researching Mayflower lines, and I've come across one group one male line that's E. It's not common, it's rare, and I'm just wondering if that is at all found in these mixed families in North America, the haplogroup E, and particularly the one that's E-M35. I'm suspecting nobody in this group has ever heard of it, but I'm just checking.
I'm not as familiar with EM35. Have you?
It's
have you
quite
checked
rare.
like family tree DNA for like a
Yeah,
project?
it's out of family tree DNA. It's quite rare. You find it in the spots in Europe. It may have come from the area of Lebanon and maybe, early 900 years ago from the places in that part of the world. They probably were merchants. They probably got around trading and end up maybe in Wales. I've heard of a recent archaeological exploration where they finally got the DNA identified and they found some E's.
Well, the word is out now. So if you all have M35s in your family, then you know who to follow up with, and you guys can collaborate on a Q article.
Fantastic. Thanks, Louise. Frankie, let's see, there you are.
Yeah, it's actually David and Frankie. Andre, it's David Ewing.
Hey!
And I have to say, you knocked it out of the park. We're not surprised, but thank you so much. I'm glad Frankie found that this rebroadcast or re-giving the talk is going to be available to us. Thank you very much. I really envied your skill at these presentations and in research as well.
Thank you. It's good to connect. Good to see you both again. And thanks for coming on. So the story here is that I, through Y-DNA actually, have uncovered that I'm a direct paternal descendant of the Ewing family that traces back to Scotland. And so David runs the Ewing Y-DNA family project. It's an amazing project. He invited me in. We've had amazing conversations, learned a whole lot about the Ewings of Scotland. And I still owe him an article. I'm going to do that for sure. But yeah, it's great seeing you and hearing your voice. So thanks for dialing into this.
Do you care to share your haplogroup?
Sure. Let's see. What is my haplogroup? It is, I should have it memorized, but it's R, and specifically R. let me see if I tagged myself.
R1B1, Andre.
Oh, thank you. Yes. R1B1, and then also I think on 23andMe it's listed as RM405.
Fantastic. You know the conversation's going deep when we start throwing out haplogroups. All
I think
right.
someone threw out their haplogroup on this in the group before we started listing where we were dialing in from. So that's why I love NGS.
And I also say a word about the Ewing Family Association Journal won the National Genealogical Society award a few years ago.
Fantastic.
That's my family.
All right. Well, it's a little bit after 9 o'clock. We certainly will keep the line open until about 9:15 if folks want to stay on. But I do want to thank you all for being here, and thank Andre and Nadine both and their family for all the support that they've shown for NGS in particular, but for Andre's obsession, or passion as he would call it. I think obsession probably, I think Nadine's probably right. But thanks to the Kearns family, whether they're here in Washington, D.C. or all the way down at the University of Virginia. Thank you all for the story that you've told now twice for NGS. We greatly appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. We'll stay on if folks want to chat. But thank you all for being here. Thank you again for being part of NGS. And we look forward to seeing you again on another Member Connects.